Hello and welcome to this session of international marketing strategies. Yesterday we had looked up at things like regulations and how a company has to keep updated with the recent regulation changes that are announced in the international level. And today we will be looking at negotiations with international customers and partners. It's a continuation of the culture. Culturally, all countries are different. However, they have to trade with one another. So it is imperative that they understand one another's culture and try to work around it to do business. So if you look at the Japanese versus the US style, the philosophy of why a company exists itself is different. If you look at the employment philosophy, Japanese layoffs are very rare. In US, it's a weekly appraisal. This week, if there is no work, then you are laid off, because they say if there is no point in having you, if there is no point in getting business, there is no point in paying you. That's all is their philosophy for employment. Promotion in Japanese companies is very slow. In US, it's very fast. If you're one of those, that's why it's one of the countries which acknowledges intelligence, which acknowledges talent so very quickly. There are children who are studying in colleges because they can just skip school and go to college if they prove that they have the required intelligentsia. So acknowledgement is very good. So same logic follows. Promotion, if you are brilliant, you have it immediately compensated for it. Career path, very general, very specified. You see all the emerging specializations, whether it's food or IT or next generation, is what United States stand for. They are very specialized, niche, and that's how the market is. That's how all their products are international, and then they are though they are number 2 after China, but if you look at specialization, they are far above Chinese in terms of intellectual property and pathway innovations in their product and categories. Decision making, group decision making, individual decision making. Control mechanism, it's very implicit, very explicit. Explicit means they will not tell it directly. They will have a procedure to implement it. They would feel that it shouldn't be pushed across to people. The Japanese. In US, it's very clear. I am the boss. You listen to what is being told. I will take the responsibility. You just execute. That's their style of operation. All North America, even Canada, US, Europe, I'm not sure, but this is a very typical American way of response to business. Responsibility is shared collectively, assigned to individuals. So there is no such thing as collective responsibility and sharing. So why these things are important when you are negotiating, when you are running a company, when you are collaborating with them, it's so important that you know these cultural differences. There are so many. These are just some highlights. It's so important to know about these things and run your business. The next important aspect in this international marketing strategy is negotiations. You would see negotiation with international customers, international companies, partners. Okay, so we will take this aspect of negotiation and see what is negotiation and how negotiations are done in international scenario. What is negotiation? Is a method by which people settle differences. It is a process by which compromise or agreement is reached while avoiding arguments and disputes. In international business, in international marketing, their negotiations happen at varying levels. Okay, so in the company level, we have dealt with, there are certain cultural differences, and you have to tune yourself with those cultural differences, and you have to go about negotiations. What if there are huge problems? Okay, then you need a different system to negotiate. Specific forms of negotiations are used in many situations: international affairs, international legal system, governments, industrial disputes, domestic relations. See the organization, it's just not one company with another company. Okay, it is the entire government, it is the entire department that comes to a table for negotiations. We will take 2 case studies. Okay, so these 2 case studies will give you, in an international level, how negotiations actually happen. Okay, process of negotiation. Let us first understand that. You have to know preparation. What is this we are negotiating about? How we have to prepare with facts and figures. It is like going and fighting out in a court of law. Only difference here is it is an international law, right? Discussions. First you can have rounds of discussions, and ultimately you need to have clarification of goal. What is it that you want from out of this negotiation? Between which country is the negotiation about? Which industry is involved in this negotiation process? Okay, at the end of it, negotiation should be win-win situation. Why? Because if you are negotiating for silk between China and India, India and China will be doing international trade with 300 other products, toys and chemicals, and so because of this one silk dispute, you cannot get into trouble with all the other aspects of international trade, right? So negotiating towards win-win. Why? Because if you are going to be at loggerheads the way Iran and US always is, you will never be able to do business, right? Next, agreement. So ultimately you come to an agreement, and then you implement the course of action. What happened after the international negotiations? So what we'll be looking at is, India had to negotiate with the United Nations. India had to negotiate with the US. India had to negotiate with in one case, India had to negotiate with the US. And in the other case, India had to fight with Japan. Clear? India had to fight with Japan, and India had to, they had differences of opinion in international trade. One case study is with Japan, and the other case study is with United States of America. Let us see what the Japanese case is. It's a smaller case, and we will finish it off with that. This is the case of India, and Indians went to WTO, World Trade Organization, and they filed a complaint against Japan. What was this about? This case relates to geographic indication. Geographic indication is, in this case, it is for Darjeeling tea. Darjeeling is a place in India. The tea from this place is very unique because it is a hilly region, and the soil is so good, the water content is so perfect, and the tea flavor is so perfect that it's one of the top 10 brands in the world tea in India. Right? Geographical indication is nobody else can use Darjeeling because Darjeeling is in India. Nobody else can use Kolhapur slippers. Kolhapur slipper, it's an indigenous product from Kolhapur. So a person in Kazakhstan cannot use this geographical indication of Kolhapur. Right. So, but what was happening was the Japanese companies started using Darjeeling tea's logo and selling Darjeeling tea. Green tea is a huge business in all the developed countries. There are tea parlors, like how we have over here gold retail, you have tea retail. There are teas for $500. Right? So these tea logo was used in Japan. So Indians put a case from the Tea Board of India, backed by the Commerce Ministry, and they won the case. And then they said you will not be able to use Darjeeling logo. They have to go through a lot of procedure. They have to prove that Darjeeling has been doing this for the past 200 years. They have their own intellectual property registered. All this they have to prove and then win. So negotiation is not just the question of knowing certain culture. It is a lot to do with international law. Normal negotiations between two companies' heads, pleasing them, getting into that is a one level. This is the next level where there is an actual dispute and how negotiations are carried on between countries, international disputes. Okay. The next case that we are going to see is a more serious case. Okay. This is a case about United States. The shrimp importers over there, people who are buying shrimp from India, many organizations, they filed a case with WTO saying that all these developing countries are dumping shrimp in US. Let us understand this whole process. So we have to first understand what is dumping. An anti-dumping, anti-dumping. An anti-dumping duty is the protectionist tariff that a domestic government, here the United States government, impose on the foreign importer. Who were the importers? 4-5 countries which included India. And they believe that the prices are below the fair value price. This is the most important part. If the competitive price, if the shrimp price is very, very low, then they would say it is protectionist. What is protectionist? The government is giving subsidies. The government is giving a lot of consideration for the people who are producing this, and that is why they are able to give it at this low cost. Now, what is wrong in Indian government giving subsidies to Indian shrimp growers? This is not accepted in international marketing. Why? Because international marketing believes in free trade. What is free trade? Manufacturing without government support in the way that you have to do as a standalone company. Having competitive advantage. Having fair price. Very, very important. Having fair price and then selling. Right? So dumping is a process where a company exports a product at a price lower than the price which is normally charged in the home market. You understand this now? The prawns or shrimp in the US market is higher, and these suppliers, importers from the other countries are able to supply it at a much lower price. So all the shrimp farmers over there took this case to the WTO, saying that they are dumping the product. So we want an anti-dumping charge against them. They cannot import to our country at the cost which is very, very low. What would you do now? India will have to fight this case. What they did is the negotiation process, or is a case study. Okay, right, let us look at this. What all happened? First, there is you should understand this market scenario very clearly. 80% of all American shrimp is being imported. 80% of all the shrimp that they eat or prawns that they eat is imported from other countries. Which are the countries that send them is Indonesia, India, so many other countries. Let's just see what Indians did. Okay, so first that we need to understand is, first there is a specific, so what the Indians did was, the Ministry of External Affairs, the Ministry of Commerce, the shrimp growing, the shrimp association, there is a association for shrimp harvesting, shrimp growing people, like how you have associations for diamond merchants, like this there is an association for people who export shrimp. So all these people came together and then they went to the US and they hired a lawyer, a law firm, and then they fought this case out. Okay, what were their arguments? The first argument is, they said the specific variety of shrimp or prawns that we send is very different, because the Indian waters, the temperature in the Indian waters are very different. It's easier to grow shrimp here. Number two, apart from getting shrimp from the oceans, in Andhra Pradesh government especially did a lot of work, and they have wonderful shrimp farming techniques now. So they have these artificial pools where they grow shrimps, like how you have mushroom farming, like that they started shrimp farming, and it is very successful. In that heat, in the right temperature, they grow, and then it's called tiger prawns. What we export is called the tiger prawns, one variety of shrimp. There are so many varieties. Our forte is the tiger prawns. So the aqua department, and then the under agriculture you have seafood. The Ministry of Central Government, State Government did a lot of research, and then they made it as a homegrown industry, as a cottage industry. Many farmers who started growing shrimp and supplying, and then there were trade houses which brought this and sent it to the US. Okay, so they explained this whole process and then said, while fishing in United States is a capital intensive industry with huge major investments, for them it's a huge investment. They need to have deep sea trolleys, which is very, very capital intense. They have to go within the to the ocean for 3 months, and there they capture fish, and then they have an in-house within that trolley. They have the unit for processing it. They clean it, they pack it. It's very, very capital intensive. So they explained to them, saying that shrimp in India is not captured like that. We grow it in artificially, and hence it is cheap. Government is not subsidizing it or throwing it for. We are able to do it with our expertise, because of natural conditions that are prevalent in our country. And then they won this case. Okay, again, we are talking about international trade negotiations, it is just not just to do with pleasantries, like how you study negotiations in communications, right? There is a subject called managerial communications. It is dealt with a very superficial level, whereas over here it is a very technical thing. So they quote everything and then finally they won this case. However, the learning from this case is it took about 1 and 2 years or so. In the meantime, there was a lot of issues. Farmers used to grow the shrimps and there will be bottlenecks in exporting it, so they have to push it to the Indian market. Shrimps that were being sold at 300 rupees per kg in the local market, prawns that fell down to 100 rupees. When there is too much production, that's what happens. So they had to go through all these things, right? So this is an excellent case study, and if you want to read more case studies, you should visit WTO website, and you have a variety of cases as to how Costa Rica had a case with some country and how Malaysia had a case with, and very beautiful small case studies are given about how each country fought against the WTO and how they won the cases. And this court is so proactive, they are so good. They say that within 45 days you have to file your answers, and most of the cases, can you believe, are closed within 90 days or 100 days, unless and otherwise there is a real issue in. So it's so efficient. WTO, World Trade Organization, which is the controlling body for all international trade. So we are taking negotiations from a very technical point of view, and so this is the thing. Ministry of External Affairs, Ministry of Commerce, Shrimp Farmers Association, all of them fought this case and they won this case in favor for India. 80% of all American prawns is being supplied by 4 or 5 different countries. One of it is India. Although the case was ultimately settled in India's favor, the market was lost to India because of certain uncertainties by the transactional decision. This market was lost during the time of the dispute, during the time of negotiations. But after the case was settled, after the negotiations were over, India is back to exporting shrimp to US. So this is about negotiation. The last aspect in the first module is global marketing environment. Okay, so global marketing environment, I looked around and said we are not going to go through all the old things. 2020 is very different. It is a year of corona pandemic. So I was saying, are there any global marketing trends meant for 2020? You should realize the international market is so fast, so proactive. This organization called Deloitte has already posted business marketing trends, and they are consulting agents. They have already put up a white paper saying these are the trends for the next years, and we will be there to assist you in helping you to do international business. And what they have focused on, what they have described as trends are as follows, right? Number 1, reinvent deep purpose for all stakeholders. It is just not enough. What we have studied so far is marketing positioning, product positioning, product feature positioning, right? USP positioning, unique selling proposition. So you highlight all these things, people will buy. But what Deloitte is saying is, today the international market has become so different. You have to project the purpose not just for the consumer who's consuming, but to all the stakeholders. Right? I'll give you all one example of how they are implementing this. There is this company from Canada which sources cotton fabrics from a place in Lucknow. They have highlighted how 300 families from that village is earning, is improving their lifestyle, how their children are going to school, and how they are becoming better as a society. 200 families. If you buy this cotton, the entire store is filled with those pictures, reinventing deep purpose to all stakeholders. This is the first case study this company has already done for corona pandemic. One store they have taken and they have shown it. Why I'm saying is, people are so proactive. Though we are sitting tight thinking that nothing is working, consultants have already started looking at pandemic, already started putting solutions, and they have started approaching clients to get things right. The second aspect is bring out the shareholder value of the brand to the international customers. We have spoken about shareholders value, but here they are saying shareholders value just not in your country, to the international customers also. Project India, project the cost, project the people, project what is behind the value of this company, whether it is milk or which we are already doing. Most of the Indian companies which are selling abroad, their positioning is very, very simple and clear. Organic, natural. Because here in India, genetically modified is hardly entered into the market, whether it is in cotton or brinjal. We are kept it far, it's not still entered in, right? So shared value, whatever the company's value, shared value. Next one, fusion wave, right from product innovation to marketing. Fusion is the word. What we mean by fusion is, there is no such thing as American product, Indian product, Japanese product anymore. It's the best of all. Whether it is music or whether it is entertainment, so that they have highlighted. And these are thoughts. So these are trends, and how they implement it to their product, and that is the difference, right? So if you are ITC, how you work on this fusion wave and how you create, whether it's Ashirwad Atta or Vivel, or whether it is styles, and how you approach international market is the acumen, is your ability to implement and sell for international trends. The next one is era of artificial intelligence. Today, with artificial intelligence, everything from your age to your bank account is shared with so many people. The only way this Deloitte is saying that you can take trust from people is being transparent, right? By being truthful. If a bank is saying that I will give you 10% interest when others are giving 7%, that is a very old way of conducting business. Today, a bank should say, I am not going to sell your information come what may. Number two, even if I have 500 branches, every employee in my company is trustworthy, have gone through a police verification. We have a control that they will not sell your data. Phishing. You know how much can happen on net. Most of them are bank employees who do it. Can any bank today in India vouch for this? Whereas an international bank can. That is the difference, and that is the key selling point, right? So today, so that is the last point. Era of artificial intelligence, trust and transparency, more than the 2% or 3% that you are promising, which is a very it's not that it's not important, but it is prioritizing it. It is second or third in priority, and the first priority is your trust and transparency. Okay, the next aspect is customer participation, not as an option but a natural phenomena. That's why, like whenever people say I'm doing a study on customer relationship management, I feel like saying, what are you talking about? Which age are you in? Today, customer relationship management is not with the company, it is with the customer. You don't want to, most of the companies shy away, don't want to engage. Customers will engage. They will get into the social media and say, this company is not engaging, this company is not answering, this company do not have return policies, this company doesn't know what to do with, which is what is happening today. Airlines business, everything got shut down. They don't know what to do with. They don't know whether they are going to fly, they are not going to fly, whether they are going to give the money back, how they are going to give the money back for all the cancellations. So customer relationship management is not an option. It is a natural phenomena. You have to gear for it. You understand? Earlier, you were having a set of flow chart and you were doing it. Today, whether you do it or not, the others customer will do, and hence you have to be more alert. You should be ahead with all the strategies. That is the reality today. Talent from within and outside, very important. So it's earlier talent was a word used only for the employees. Today, if you see one of your customers are giving very good insight, you call them and then say, please come and join my company. So it is just not talent hunting from the point of view of the employee, which is why, to create your own database, your own credentials, your own portfolio. I keep insisting, create your portfolio. How will you create your portfolio? Each student, by commenting, talking, expressing your views, analyzing. Okay, so when you are